Good morning, everybody. Welcome to First Congregational Church of Langsburg online service. Thank you for joining with us here in this digital space. My name is Olivia, and I will be your host for today. You can check in and let us know you are here by saying hello in the comments below. You can also share anything we need to hold space for there, and our community will remember you in our prayers. Today is the third Sunday of Easter, which is an 8-week season which explores the resurrection of Christ and the significance and meaning that it has on our world today, and our responsibility toward the world as the people of God. And to help us explore, we have a few poems, prayers, and readings for us along the way. Blessings on this journey.
Good morning. This is Troy, and I'm here to bring you the call to worship for this week's service. This is Psalm 30, retold by Malcolm Guy. He gives us, too, a voice to sing his praises, so much the more because we were brought low, that we might know we have a God who raises up the lowly. Riches made us slow to love you, slow to turn you into praise, but sudden loss and crisis made us know our true dependence on your love. Our days of false security are gone. We fell into a pit of our own making. Raise us up again, each out of their own hell, and give us oil for ashes, joy for mourning. Restore us in your love, and we will tell of how through our long night we heard your warning, and heeded you, and found your love again, how night withdrew, and joy came in the morning.
Good morning. We light this single candle during the Easter season to remind us that Christ is the light of the world. As this candle dispels that darkness around it, may our lives filled with the life and love of God illuminate the world with the kindness and justice of God through both our actions and attitudes.
Well, good morning all, and welcome to the third Sunday of Easter, a time of new beginnings, fresh starts, and revived life. Easter is the proclamation that death has been defeated and love proved more powerful than violence, hatred, betrayal, and fear. And all like these, that systemic power asks of anyone who desires inclusion into its worldly prosperity and protection. Now, last week we looked at how the male disciples were hiding behind locked doors in a house in Jerusalem on the evening of the resurrection. And then Christ appears to them, fills them with the Spirit, and then commissions them to go out and forgive sins. Thomas even has this amazing encounter with Christ in which he declares, "My Lord and my God," at the end. So you would think that the next thing we hear about is all the great stuff that these people are accomplishing in the world. But no, this week Christ appears to 7 of the disciples for the third time. And they're all gathered around the Sea of Galilee, taking up their old jobs of fishing again. So what's the deal? Well, you ever notice those handles above your head inside of a vehicle? Now, I didn't know what their official name was until this week when I did a little bit of research, but they're called the grab bar, and they're designed to help you in and out of the vehicle. Now, as a teenager, my friends and I had a different name for them that roughly translated into the "oh crap" handle. And they did not assist us in and out of the vehicle, but instead, when the driver of the vehicle was not doing so well, maybe getting a little crazy, maybe on purpose, the passengers had something to instinctively grasp for as they cried out, "oh crap." So a big thank you to whoever invented those handle things. They got me through some of my childhood years. Now, when everything falls apart and everything's going crazy, you reach for something to hold on to. And oftentimes it's something familiar and comfortable, like sayings that can reassure you that things are going to be okay, or familiar foods that can bring a sense of comfort, familiar hobbies that can take you outside the stress of the moment for a while, familiar faces that help provide stability and love, maybe some familiar practices and routines that help give life a little more structure. So we need these things, sometimes like we need a lifeboat in the stormy seas of life. Now, today's scripture verse is an interesting one. It almost sounds like an epilogue. And perhaps it was written later on and added to the account, but it feels a little bit disconnected from the previous week's account of the disciples' encounter with the risen Christ. and this filling of the Spirit moment. But for some reason, they didn't take up the mission of going out and forgiving sins. They went home to the Sea of Galilee. And the tone of the narrative sounds a little bit depressive and defeatist, if you ask me. Not exactly what I was expecting directly following encounter with the risen Christ who defeated death and then filled you with the same Spirit that raised and overcame the powers of the world, right? It's a little bit different of a feel going on in this verse. Not exactly everything I expected. But this story reveals how deeply human these people are. The disciples have not recovered from the shock of losing their friend and teacher, and their dreams and expectations, as well as the trauma of how they were all pursued by authorities, almost died, and then narrowly escaped. I guess even a profound religious experience doesn't cancel out the body's mental, physical, and emotional and psychological responses to traumatic events. So let's hear this story read to us and do some exploration of what's going on the other side. See you in a minute.
Hi, good morning. Today's reading is from John chapter 21, verses 1 through 14. After this, Jesus manifested himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. He made this manifestation in this way. There were together Simon Peter, Thomas, who was called the twin, Nathanael from Cana of Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I am going fishing." They said to him, "We are coming with you." They went out and got aboard the boat, but during the night they caught nothing. However, just as the day was breaking, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not realize it was Jesus. Then Jesus said to them, "Children, you do not have anything to eat, do you?" And they answered, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it. But they were not able to haul it in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." Now Simon Peter, on hearing that it was the Lord, put on his outer garment, for he was naked, and plunged into the sea. But the other disciples came in the small boat, dragging the net full of fish. For they were not long away from the land, only about 300 feet. When they came ashore, they saw there was a charcoal fire with fish lying on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you just now caught." So Simon Peter went on aboard and hauled the net ashore full of big fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net did not burst. Jesus said to them, "Come, have your breakfast." Not one of the disciples had the courage to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after being raised from the dead. Have a great morning.
So if you've ever been through something traumatic, you know that it takes a toll on your body, physically, mentally, and emotionally. It can just drain your tanks of the surplus energy that you use to do your day in and day out life. So when we hear about the disciples returning to their old trade, their old life, we can jump to some unhelpful conclusions. Why don't they have faith? Why don't they just trust? You know, they've seen the risen Lord and they still don't get it. Come on, guys. But let's be patient with these fellas. Let's remember that these disciples have been through a very traumatic event. They're expecting to take Jerusalem's throne and reestablish the nation of Israel over and above Rome. And since they're in on this ground floor of this thing, they assume that they get prominent seats of authority and power. Not too bad for some fishermen who were middle class without any ambition to do much more with their life until they ran into this wandering rabbi named Jesus. Now, if you remember at the beginning of this story, Jesus calls them to be disciples, which is the reverse of how it was supposed to be in this culture. Students would normally climb the educational ladder and then hopefully stand out enough to get the attention of a rabbi, and then the rabbi would let them follow him after much, pursuit. But if not, you just dropped out and you did a trade job like fishing or something, or carpentry. Very few qualified to be a disciple of a rabbi. So that is where Jesus finds these fishermen in the beginning of the chapters of John. And he calls them, and they leave the family business and become disciples. Something that they never thought was an opportunity for them at all. And then they follow this rabbi for 3 years, watching him perform miracles, hearing him teach, coming to an understanding that he was the promised Messiah. And then things start to change a little bit. Jesus starts telling them that he needs to go to Jerusalem to die, crucified even. That just does not compute with their understanding. Other figures rose up and gained a following and rose up against Rome, and then they were crucified. It was just this sure signal of a failed Messiah, not a successful one. And Jesus is saying in advance that he's going to walk this road. They're going to walk right into Jerusalem, and they're going to kill him, and he's going to die just like all the rest. Well, it's no wonder they don't understand what Jesus is talking about. So they make their way to Jerusalem, enter the city with much fanfare. Jesus claims the throne, cleans out the temple, and these two actions get their hopes up again that he's going to follow through with the third expectation, which is rally the people to militarily defeat Rome and kick them all out. It's even thought of in a few circles that Judas betrays Jesus for such a little amount, not because he was so greedy for money, but because he wanted to force Jesus' hand into violent action against Rome. When it fails, his friend dies and he commits suicide in utter regret. Now the rest of the male disciples run in fear, save John, who stands by Jesus and his mother. And they failed in the biggest way possible. They placed their trust in attaining political power through violence for an end goal that only benefited their small slice of humanity. Jesus was up to something much bigger and for the whole world. It's no wonder Jesus walking around in flesh and blood after he died is very confusing to them. They're still in processing mode. They return to the familiar. I'm going fishing. Peter picks up his old life, his old trade, and attempts to do some rebuilding. But he catches nothing. And he doesn't even see what God is up to. Well, not just yet. And then Jesus shows up on the scene. Let's see what happens next. Now, some of you are really great at math. Numbers just make sense in your head. And for others of us, mathing is very hard. Numbers don't make a lot of sense in our head. Now, the left and the right side of the brain are each responsible for logical or creative thinking. And we usually have a side that is dominant over the other. So it's really rare to find a mathematician accountant who's a genius at writing poetry or painting landscapes. And oftentimes, genius artists are not stellar bookkeepers. I mean, it happens for sure. I'm only speaking in generalities here. Numbers for us are primarily quantitative, meaning we use them to count the quantity of things. It is especially important in a capitalist society. We keep track of things like cash flow and inventory and budgets and all those kinds of things. High quantitative numbers mean success, so we value numbers in our society. Even as a church, we measure the 3 B's: buildings, butts, and budgets. Having good numbers in these categories give us a sense that we're winning. And I stress that our value of quantitative numbers is the result of the value of our society being scientific and capitalistic in mindset. Now, numbers for them are not primarily quantitative. For sure, they use numbers to count things, but their number system only went up to 10,000. In fact, the word million wasn't even invented until the 13th century. We didn't even have a use of a number so large until then. So that's 1,300 years away. For them, numbers were qualitative, meaning that they were symbolically descriptive more than they were used for keeping track of amounts of things. Now, the danger for us is getting into some kind of weird numerology that attempts to tie Nero to Hitler or something crazy like that. So to successfully understand how John uses numbers, we need to let it stay in its own context and ask John what he was trying to communicate to the people he was writing to, and not start pulling out some weird meanings out of stuff. Now, the disciples see Jesus on the shore and they don't know it is him, which keeps happening, by the way. This is the third time he has visited them. I'm not sure what Jesus was up to in the in-between times, but the disciples had enough time to pack up from the holiday trip to Jerusalem, come back home to Galilee, before this third encounter takes place. Now, the number 3 is fairly easy to see the significance of. It's a big spiritual number, the number of God's Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. There's spiritual significance to it. And then there's 7 disciples, and this is also a significant number because 7 was symbolic of wholeness of a thing. A week is 7 days, and a moon cycle is 7 days apiece, and there's 4 cycles and whatnot. But 153 fish? What in the world is even up with 153? Now, John likes to have fun with larger numbers like this. In the Hebrew language, they use letters for numbers. They didn't have separate number system. They had letter system. And in the book of Revelation, John uses the number 666 to signify the Antichrist figure. Turns out it was Caesar Nero's name because his Hebrew letters represent the numbers 50, 200, 6, 50, 100, 60, and 200. And that all adds up to 666. But what's up with 153? It's a numerical representation of a city mentioned in Ezekiel 47. Now, the city is not so much of an important reference as the Ezekiel passage that John wants us to come into mind here. Now, it paints a poetic picture in this passage of a river filled with life and overflowing with life. And it comes from the temple, and wherever it flows, it makes all things new wherever it goes. And this great catch that they have brought in, the 153 fish, it actually points us to this task that Jesus is calling them towards. The Spirit in you makes you the river of life, sent out into the world to make a new Eden, a new garden where God's people dwell together, a new kingdom, a new world. And he's about to call them out on task and say, go live out Ezekiel 47 because the river is now within you. Take it out there. Now, around here, we believe in the power of poetry, art, thought, song. And we use something at the end of each message called a benediction, which is a Latin word meaning good saying or good talk. And it's used to invoke a blessing upon all those who listen. Now, I don't exactly know how all this works, in like some scientific sense, but I do believe that it plants something within our hearts each week. And slowly, these benedictions change the course of our life for the better. Now, today's benediction is a wonderful poem from Jan Richardson, one of my favorite poets. And it speaks of this blessing that does not end, much like John's use of Ezekiel imagery with this river of life full of fish that spills out generative qualities of life wherever it flows. You see, humans built their lives around rivers for much of the human existence. It was a form of transportation, of export, of import, food, of drink. Now, a small community could survive on a well, but a large civilization needed to be gathered around rivers and coastal regions. To wander too far from the river was almost certain death. So the entire religious life of the early Christians rotated around gathering in the temple. It was like a well of community life and religious worship. And this central pillar, the temple, would collapse in 70 AD when the Jews revolted against Rome, resulting in a 4-year war, and Caesar sent down his legions to decimate the whole city, including their beloved temple, around which their whole society and culture and life rotated. Their hub that everything was dependent upon was totally crushed. So this image of a river is so important. John picks this image as a metaphor of the disciples' mission. You have the water of life within you. Take it and bring life wherever you go. You don't need to gather in this temple any longer because the river is in you. Take it out. Go to the ends of the earth. It goes with you. You don't have to come to it. Now, this is a revolutionary concept for them, but a culture saver for the early Christians who would gather in homes around tables and learn the way of Jesus that brings life to the world. Now, this blessing and benediction is like that. It goes with you and it does not end. And you don't have to come to it, for it's going to go with you, within you. It'll plant something in you, and it is never going to leave you or forsake you. So let's hear this benediction read, and have a blessed week. We'll see you for number 4 next week.
Blessing that does not end. From the moment it first laid eyes on you, This blessing loved you. This blessing knew you from the start. It cannot explain how it just knows that the first time it sat down beside you, it entered into a conversation that had already been going on forever. Believe this conversation has not stopped. Believe this love still lives. The love that crossed an impossible distance to reach you, to find you, to take your face into its hands and bless you. Believe this does not end. The gesture, once enacted, endures. Believe this love goes on, that it still takes your face into its hands, that it presses its forehead to yours, as it speaks to you in undying words, that it has never ceased to gather your heart into its heart. Believe this blessing abides. Believe it goes with you always. Believe it knows you still. By Jan Richardson.
Thank you so much for joining us online today. We hope this service has been a blessing to you. What now? First, participate. If you'd like to participate in our services, we would welcome your readings with a simple phone recording. Second, partner. If you would like to give financially to ensure the continuation of this online service, there is a link on the bottom of your screen. And lastly, subscribe. You can subscribe on YouTube or like our page on Facebook to stay updated with our online services. We hope you have found some hope, help, and healing today. See you next week.
Nice day. Now I got my pool in the background. Going fishing. Peace out. It's bright out here. Let that glory